Lightweight. Charter Arms is based out of Connecticut. They've moved around throughout the years. They had some called the pre-Bridgeport years. Then they had the Bridgeport models, the Stratford, Connecticut models, the Shelton, Connecticut models. I tend to prefer the Bridgeport, Connecticut, and the Stratford, Connecticut models because they still have the exposed ejector rod, and I believe the finish on those models is a little bit better than the current production. You really can't get any better than the old classic 100% steel frame Undercover revolvers. While the new ones are still very affordable and very functional, I don't particularly like the finish that they put on the new guns. I find it a little bit harder to clean, but if you do want a budget revolver that will have a lifetime warranty and will be a lot of fun to shoot, you really can't go wrong with a Charter Arms Undercover revolver. Again, Charter Arms Undercover stainless steel. I absolutely love this revolver. I love these. I mean, I would buy 5 of these things. 10 of them, every model that they made from the 1960s and 70s, 3-inch barrel. I would love to get more of these things. If I find them, I will buy them.
I would love to get more of these things. If I find them, I will buy them.
You can see that most of these are Stratford, Connecticut models, and the reason being, those are really my favorite models. I would absolutely buy a Bridgeport, Connecticut model, which was the first generation, if I find one. But for the most part, the ones that I've seen most in the stores are the Stratford, Connecticut models. So as you can hear from those clips as we look back and reminisce through a whole bunch of my Charter Arms videos previously, you can tell that I really like the classic Charter Arms revolvers, the ones that come from Stratford, Connecticut or Bridgeport, Connecticut. Up until this point in time, the Bridgeport, Connecticut models have evaded me on the local market. But recently, when I was perusing the used section of one of my favorite shops, I noticed that a Charter Arms Undercover popped up, and based on the website, it had a 5-digit serial number. Now, 5-digit serial number is pretty early in production of the firearms. I have kind of put together an interpolated list of all the serial number ranges, which is roughly directionally correct. So when I saw that it had a 5-digit serial number, I knew this had to be built around 1966 or 1967, and most likely this was a Bridgeport, Connecticut model. So I immediately called the shop the next morning. I had seen it late at night. They close at like 6 p.m., and I immediately called the shop the next thing in the morning, 9 o'clock when they first opened, said, "Hey, is that Charter Arm still available?" And I was pretty worried because the salesman on the phone actually took quite a while to find it. And then finally, he did find it. So I had him set it aside for me so I could go back later that day and look at it. And I was pleasantly surprised when I walked in the door. Not only is this a Bridgeport, Connecticut model with a 5-digit serial number, and again, probably from around 1966 or 1967, it was in immaculate condition. Now, it's really tough to tell from just looking at pictures of this gun, but it appears to me that this gun may have never been fired. It has been obviously, cycled. The action's been cycled. There's that turning line on the cylinder from the cylinder locking and unlocking and turning. But as I kind of walk around this gun, you can see how beautiful the bluing is on this gun. And if we look at the back of the frame, normally when you have a gun that's been carried a lot or shot a lot, you'll start to get little circles worn on the back of that frame where those rounds are pounding into the frame as it gets smacked around, again, from shooting it and carrying it. And there's no evidence of those round marks on the back of the frame. So if this was fired, it was fired very little and it was kept very clean. The bluing on this thing, I would say, is probably in 95 to 98%. It's in excellent condition with just a little bit of wear on the front of the muzzle. And most likely that came from the person putting this in and out of that Phobos holster that I got with it. And the Phobos holster is actually really nice, but it's made for a Smith & Wesson J-frame, not for the Charter Arms. And they do have slightly different shapes on the trigger guards. So the Charter Arms likely was, the bluing wear on the front of that is probably from being slipped in and out of that holster because it's not really the right holster for the gun. But even if you had the right holster, you will get a little bluing wear. Overall, though, this gun is in phenomenal condition. It is in excellent shape. Even the bottom of the frame, there's no nicks or scrapes in the wood on the grips. The bottom of the frame, that trigger guard is not all scratched up like you see on guns that have been carried a lot. So this appears to be a very low usage or maybe an unfired survivor from around 1966 or 1967. The action, the lockup, everything on this is extremely tight. And this was just one of those unicorns where, once again, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And not only that, this was probably the cheapest Chartered Arms revolver I have ever found. This gun with the Phobos holster, with the little pouch with 3 speed strips, was only 2 Benjis. And that is unheard of, especially for a classic. Somebody obviously did not know what they had. Now, the trigger in this thing feels really good. I'm going to go ahead and pull my trigger gauge out, and let's see if we can get a weight on this thing. Now, a lot of people complain about trigger pull on revolvers, at least in double action, but in this particular case, this Chartered Arms, I was pleasantly surprised with both the single action and double action pull. That is 4 pounds, 0.04 ounces on that first single action pull. Let's do 2 more so we can get an average. 4 pounds, 4.7 ounces on the second pull in single action. And 3 pounds, 3.5 ounces on the third pull. For an average of 3 pounds, 13.5 ounces, which is phenomenal for single action pull on this revolver. So let's go ahead and see if we can get double action pull. And sometimes it's tough to get double action pull on these because in some cases they're so high it won't even register on this gauge. But let's see what we get here. 9 pounds, 15 ounces. So under 10 pounds, that's not too bad. Let's take a second pull. Second pull was 10 pounds even. Let's go ahead and take a third pull and then we'll get an average. And the last pull comes in at 9 pounds and 14.6 ounces. So the average of 9 pounds, 15.2 ounces. And that's respectable for a double action pull. And you can see how consistent they were throughout the testing. So I know a lot of people are probably tired of hearing me talk about Chartered Arms revolvers. I have many, many videos on these. And while they're not perfect revolvers, they're not the smoothest revolvers, they're not maybe the finest fit and finish, but they hold a dear place in my heart. I've said many times before, a lot of the reason I like these, they're still made in New England, in Connecticut, which is not a very gun-friendly area. They've built their business on surviving just by building American-made revolvers. And while I don't like the new ones nearly as much as I do these classics from Stratford and Bridgeport, Connecticut, I still appreciate the company. I appreciate the legacy they've built. And I will try to buy as many of these classics as I can possibly find. I'm glad to finally found one of my unicorns, which is this Bridgeport, Connecticut Chartered Arms Undercover, and it's a beautiful example of an early pistol. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. God bless America. Support your 2A rights. Get out there and shoot. And you remember, if someone asks you to give up some of your freedom for the greater good, remind them that freedom is always the greater good.